In August of 30 BCE, the richest woman in the Mediterranean locked herself inside a mausoleum she had built for her own death. Outside, Rome's most powerful general closed in. Her fleet was gone. Her armies had surrendered. Her lover lay dying. History remembers Cleopatra's end as romantic, an asp, a final act of defiance, a queen choosing dignity over humiliation. But the truth is colder. Her final days were not poetic. They were calculated, desperate, and surrounded by betrayal. What happened in those last hours was not legend, it was political annihilation. Cleopatra was not merely a seductress draped in gold. She was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek royal house that had governed Egypt since the death of Alexander the Great. By the time she ascended the throne in 51 BCE, Egypt was economically strained and politically fragile. Rome was the dominant power of the Mediterranean. Egyptian independence survived only by negotiation, alliance, and calculated submission. Cleopatra proved formidable. She mastered languages. She understood finance. She aligned herself first with Julius Caesar, securing both political protection and a son, Caesarion. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, Rome fractured into civil war. Cleopatra made a second alliance, this time with Mark Antony. Together, they formed not only a political partnership but a dynastic vision, an Eastern empire centered in Alexandria. But in Rome, Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, understood something essential. Cleopatra was not just Antony's partner. She was a rival power, and rivals are not negotiated with, they are eliminated. Before swords were drawn, narratives were crafted. Octavian did not declare war on Antony directly. Instead, he declared war on Cleopatra. He framed her as a foreign temptress who had corrupted a Roman general. In Roman imagination, she became the embodiment of Eastern decadence, luxurious, manipulative, dangerous. This was strategic. By turning the conflict into a defense of Roman morality against foreign corruption, Octavian transformed civil war into patriotic necessity. The decisive clash came in 31 BCE at the Battle of Actium. Cleopatra's fleet withdrew mid-conflict, whether by strategy or panic remains debated. Antony followed. The retreat shattered morale. Within a year, Octavian invaded Egypt. By summer of 30 BCE, Alexandria was encircled. The queen who once hosted Caesar and Antony in splendor now faced capture. And in Rome, capture did not mean negotiation. It meant spectacle. As Octavian's forces entered Alexandria, misinformation spread rapidly. One rumor proved fatal. Antony was told Cleopatra had taken her own life. Believing her dead, and seeing no path to victory, he fell on his sword. The wound did not kill him immediately. Instead, he lingered bleeding, conscious in agony. Cleopatra, still alive, had retreated to a mausoleum she had prepared, filled with treasure, perhaps intended as leverage or a final bargaining chip. When she learned of Antony's failed suicide, she ordered him brought to her. According to ancient sources, he was hoisted through a window into the mausoleum, dying in her arms. It was not cinematic, it was violent and chaotic. A general once commanding legions now expired helplessly in a sealed tomb. With Antony gone, Cleopatra stood alone. The psychological weight of that moment cannot be overstated. Her military shield was gone, her dynasty vulnerable, her children at risk. Octavian would not kill her immediately. He needed her alive. Contrary to romantic portrayals, Cleopatra did not immediately seek death. She attempted negotiation. Octavian entered Alexandria cautiously. Cleopatra was taken into guarded custody, not in chains, but under strict surveillance. Her wealth was inventoried, her palace occupied, her communications monitored. Ancient accounts describe Cleopatra testing Octavian's intentions. She reportedly attempted to charm him, to assess whether diplomacy remained possible. But Octavian's strategy was clear. He intended to parade her in Rome during his triumph, a ritual procession celebrating conquest. Conquered rulers were displayed before crowds, humiliated publicly, then often executed. For Cleopatra, this would mean being marched in chains through Roman streets, mocked as the foreign seductress who dared challenge Rome. This was the fate of defeated kings. For a queen who had ruled as divine pharaoh, it was annihilation of identity. The horror was not immediate death. It was degradation. The turning point came when Cleopatra understood she would not negotiate her survival. Octavian allowed her to visit Antony's tomb, perhaps as a gesture, perhaps as calculated reassurance. But intelligence reached her she would be transported to Rome. Time narrowed. Cleopatra's final days were spent in confinement, watched constantly by Roman guards. She likely tested poisons on condemned prisoners to determine a method that would ensure swift death without visible mutilation. This detail matters. If she intended to die by venom, it was not romantic symbolism, it was pharmacological calculation. Ancient historians disagree on the method. An asp concealed in a basket of figs, a poisoned hairpin, a toxic ointment. What is consistent is this: she chose death to deny Octavian's spectacle, and she did so knowing the consequences. Her eldest son, Caesarion, fled south. Octavian ordered him captured and executed shortly after. "Too many Caesars," he reportedly remarked. Her younger children by Antony were taken to Rome and raised by Octavia, Antony's former wife. Cleopatra's dynasty ended in days. The image of Cleopatra reclining peacefully as a snake bites her arm is art, not forensic certainty. Venomous bites are rarely serene. They produce pain, swelling, neurological distress. If an asp was used, the death may have been slower and more physically traumatic than Renaissance paintings suggest. Some scholars argue poison delivered through a concealed instrument would have been more reliable and discreet. What matters is not the serpent. It is the context. Cleopatra died in captivity, under guard, stripped of sovereignty, facing public humiliation and the extinction of her political legacy. Octavian entered the mausoleum too late. Her body was found alongside 2 loyal attendants, also dead. Rome declared her suicide an act of pride. But politically, it was a strategic denial. She refused to become Rome's trophy. Octavian annexed Egypt as a Roman province, the empire's most valuable territory. Unlike other regions, Egypt became his personal domain, controlled directly by the emperor. Its grain would feed Rome for centuries. With Cleopatra gone, Octavian reshaped the narrative. She was recast as dangerous, immoral, irrational, a cautionary tale of female ambition. Antony was portrayed as weak, seduced, corrupted. The propaganda succeeded. Within 3 years, Octavian became Augustus, Rome's first emperor. The Roman Empire was born from her defeat. Cleopatra's image, filtered through Roman historians like Plutarch and Cassius Dio, survived primarily through the lens of her enemies. Her political intelligence was minimized, her administrative skill dismissed, her final act romanticized. The horror of her last days was softened into legend. Imagine the final nights. A ruler raised as divine royalty, fluent in diplomacy and war, confined under foreign guard. The knowledge that her children's fate was uncertain. The certainty that Rome would rewrite her story. Isolation is a weapon. Cleopatra's decision to die was not impulsive despair. It was strategic autonomy in a situation engineered to remove all agency. Yet even this autonomy was limited. She could choose how to die. She could not choose what would be remembered. Her death marked the end of Hellenistic Egypt. Nearly 3 centuries of Ptolemaic rule vanished overnight. Egypt's wealth strengthened Rome's imperial machinery. Augustus' regime stabilized after decades of civil war, in part because Cleopatra had been eliminated as a symbol of alternative power. The Mediterranean shifted from contested republics to centralized empire. Culturally, Cleopatra became myth, painted, dramatized, romanticized. But myth obscures politics. Her final days were not a lover's tragedy. They were the calculated destruction of a sovereign state and its ruling house. The horror lies not only in her death, but in the precision of the system that made it inevitable. Cleopatra's final days were horrific not because of a snake. They were horrific because she understood, with clarity, that she would be displayed as proof of Rome's supremacy. That her identity would be reduced to spectacle. That history would be written by the victor. So she denied them the image. In death she reclaimed narrative control, if only partially. But even then, Rome reshaped her memory. Power does not merely conquer territory. It conquers reputation. It edits legacy. Cleopatra died in a sealed tomb, surrounded by silence. Octavian walked into Rome crowned in triumph. History remembers the empire. It rarely pauses on the woman who saw it coming and chose to exit the stage on her own terms. And perhaps that is the enduring lesson. The final act of power is not survival. It is deciding how you will be remembered when survival is no longer possible.